This was never a love story, it was a trauma bond dressed like fate. He thought he was choosing a woman. In reality, Damien Moretti was choosing a weakness, and Evelyn, desperate enough to save her niece, stepped into a system built on power, fear, and emotional captivity. What makes this story terrifying is not the guns or the blood, it's that both of them mistake survival for intimacy. He calls it protection, she calls it a deal, but underneath it all, this is the anatomy of violence, teaching two damaged people how to confuse possession with love.
A single word fell, and the most volatile room in New York went silent. It was the kind of slip that, in this company, was a death sentence. When Evelyn murmured the word baby, surrounded by armed and agitated men, she had forgotten she was speaking to Damien Moretti, the undisputed king of the East Coast. Any other man would have been met with pleas for mercy. Damien, however, did not follow the script. He approached, his face unreadable, and issued a command designed to rewrite her world. Say it again, but slower. The sweltering heat of the Obsidian Room's kitchen was a world away from the ice-cold control of the VIP lounge. Evelyn Vance wiped sweat from her brow, the server's uniform chafing her skin. She was an intruder in this world, an NYU paralegal student drowning in debt, not a waitress to the criminal elite. A panicked call from her sister Sarah for $5,000 to fund her daughter. Lily's emergency surgery had forced Evelyn's hand. The Obsidian Room was less a club and more a secret citadel, hidden inside a plain Tribeca building. Here, the city's titans had conversations too dangerous for any wire. Table 4 needs another Louis Vance. The floor manager, Mr. Henderson, a man made of pure anxiety, whispered as he thrust a tray at her, "And you will not make eye contact with anyone. If you drop that bottle, your life is worth less than what's in it." Evelyn nodded, her heart pounding. She adjusted the hidden Bluetooth earpiece, keeping the line open to a distraught Sarah at the hospital. For her sister's sake, she kept the channel active, muting her side as she entered the main lounge. "I can't do this, Evie." Sarah's choked sobs filtered through. "The doctors say if I don't pay a deposit in the next hour." Evelyn slipped through the velvet curtains into the lounge, and the atmosphere instantly changed. The air tasted of expensive cigars, leather, and the faint, sharp smell of guns masked by cologne. The dim lighting cast long shadows from men wearing $5,000 Brioni suits. Table 4 was tucked away in a corner, obscured by a smoked glass screen. There sat a man who looked as if he were carved from marble and menace, Damien Moretti. Even Evelyn, buried in law textbooks, knew who he was. The papers called him a shipping magnate. The underworld knew him as the Reaper. He was in a terse negotiation with a rival, Lucas, of the Russo family. The tension was a physical presence. Damien's hand rested on the table, appearing relaxed, but his knuckles were bone white. Evelyn glided forward, her own hands shaking as she reached for the empty glasses. "You think you can bully me out at the waterfront?" Damien's voice was a low, smooth vibration of pure threat. "I built those docks." "Times have changed, Damien," Lucas sneered. "Maybe you've lost your nerve." Through Evelyn's earpiece, Sarah's crying grew frantic. "I'm going to lose her, Evelyn. I'm going to lose my baby." Evelyn's control shattered. In a fatal lapse, forgetting she stood between two syndicate bosses at war, she unmuted her mic to murmur a word of comfort. She leaned in to place a coaster beside Damien's hand. At that precise moment, Damien slammed his hand on the table to emphasize his point. Evelyn jerked back at the sudden violence, knocking the cognac bottle so it swayed. In the blur of motion, her eyes on the table, she whispered urgently into the device, "It's okay, baby. Just breathe. I'm handling it." The silence that fell was absolute. The club's music played on, but around table 4, time stopped. Lucas's face registered pure shock, his eyes flicking from the server to the dawn. The 3 bodyguards behind Damien went still, their hands shifting inside their jackets. Evelyn froze as the full weight of her blunder crushed her. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was looking straight at Damien Moretti as he turned his head. His eyes, the color of a coming storm, were cold and sharp. He no longer saw Lucas. He ignored the multi-million-dollar deal. His entire focus was on the trembling server who had just called New York's most feared man baby during a raw show of power. Damien didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply leaned back, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips. It was a look of dangerous curiosity. "Pardon me?" Damien asked, his voice dropping to a silken whisper. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She fumbled to mute her earpiece, her face burning. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." Damien raised a hand, silencing her stammer. He rose to his full height, his shadow falling over her. At over 6'3", he radiated an intense heat and command that made her unsteady. He stepped into her space, trapping her against the table with his sheer presence. He leaned in, his lips near her ear, and she could smell sandalwood and danger. "Don't apologize," he murmured, loud enough for Lucas and his men to hear. "Say it again, slower." Evelyn forgot how to breathe. Her mind scrambled for an escape, but she was boxed in. To her left, Damien's second in command, a scarred man named Matthew, watched her with calculating eyes. To her right, 2 other guards blocked any chance of flight. Sir, please," Evelyn begged, her voice a tremor. "It was a misunderstanding. I was on the phone with—" "On the phone." Damien pulled back an inch, his eyes studying her face. He saw her fear, but he also saw a core of steel beneath it. She wasn't crying. She was thinking. It intrigued him. Damien turned to Lucas, who was still frozen in shock. "Lucas, go! The deal is off! If I find your people near the Brooklyn Navy Yard again, I won't send an envoy. I'll send a hearse." Lucas started to speak, but a single look from Damien killed the words in his throat. The rival boss snatched his papers and fled, shooting one last, baffled look at the waitress who had apparently calmed the storm. With the room clear, Damien retook his chair and nodded to the one Lucas had vacated. "Sit." "I can't," Evelyn answered, her hands clamped to the tray. "My manager—" "Your manager works for the owner of this building. The owner of this building works for me. Sit." Evelyn sat. Damien poured 2 glasses of the Louis XIII cognac and slid one across to her. "You just stopped a lot of bloodshed, Kara. Lucas was stalling. He thought I was stressed, weak, but you—" A deep, dark chuckle escaped him. "You made him think I was so untouchable that I let my mistress serve drinks during a strategy meeting." "I'm not your mistress," Evelyn replied, her voice gaining strength. "And I have to leave. My niece is in the hospital. That's who I was on the phone with." Damien stopped, his glass hovering before his lips. "The baby?" "She's 5. She needs an operation." Evelyn felt tears burn her eyes again. "I took this job for the down payment, so if you are going to kill me for speaking out of turn, please do it quickly. I have somewhere else to be." Damien watched her. He had spent 20 years reading people. He knew she was telling the absolute truth. His gaze dropped to her worn-out shoes, the frayed hem of her uniform, the raw panic in her hazel eyes. He took out a sleek black phone and dialed. "Matthew," Damien said, his eyes locked on Evelyn. "Call Saint. Jude's and Mount Sinai. Binda." He paused, glancing at Evelyn. Last name. Vance, she breathed out. Lily Vance. Find which hospital has Lily Vance, pay her bill in full, and move her to a private suite. Evelyn gasped. What? No, I can't let you do that. What is your price? Damien ended the call, setting the phone down. Because you are now in my debt, and my debts are never small. In your debt? Evelyn repeated, her tone sharp with disbelief. You just said I saved you from a violent outcome. You also publicly humiliated a rival boss, which means Lucas is now digging into your life. He'll be curious. When he learns you are a simple waitress, he will know I played him. He will target you to get to me. Damien leaned in, his stare hardening. You are now part of this, Miss Vance, by choice or not. Evelyn felt the room tilt. So, what is it that you want from me? I want a distraction, Damien said coolly. The Russo family is getting aggressive. They see me as isolated, without an heir, a wife, or any personal ties. They think they can move on me because I have no weakness. He sipped his cognac. I need them to believe I have one. A new obsession, someone under my protection. It will make them reckless, and that will allow me to crush them. Evelyn shook her head. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? Not girlfriend, Damien corrected as he stood and fastened his jacket. My betrothed. The notion was absurd. You're delusional, Evelyn countered, rising to her full height. I'm a law student with a life of my own. I am not playing house with a mob boss. Damien remained impassive. Your niece's surgery cost $80,000. It's paid, he added. And Lucas Russo's men are stationed outside. If you leave alone, you won't make it to the train. He held his hand out to her. It was large, calloused, and unyielding. 6 months, Evelyn. Live in my penthouse. Wear the clothes I buy. Attend the events I choose. Be the woman who tamed Damien Moretti. In exchange, your niece gets the best care possible, your student loans vanish, and you walk away with $5 million. Her eyes fixed on his hand. This was a textbook deal with the devil. Yet forces beyond her control were converging. A storm brewing over the city, a text from her friend Sarah confirming Lily was in a VIP room, prepped for surgery. The message was a mix of relief and an unspoken question about her methods. Evelyn met Damien's cold, storm-gray eyes, accepting there was no turning back. Her careless words about the baby had sealed her fate. She took his hand. 6 months, she affirmed, a weak attempt at setting terms. And any unwanted physical contact voids this contract. A slight smirk, the classic tell of a narcissist, touched Damien's lips as his fingers closed around hers. I won't need to force you, Evelyn, he said, pulling her almost imperceptibly closer. Within 6 months, you will ask for my touch. The drive to Damien's home unfolded in a heavy, psychodramatic silence. Seated in the back of an armored Escalade, a leather console divided them like a border between nations. Through the tinted glass, Evelyn watched the city lights smear into abstraction from the electric chaos of Times Square to the deep shadows of Hell's Kitchen, finally resolving into the crystalline towers of Central Park South. She looked down at her own trembling hands, a physical sign of her spiraling stress. An hour ago, her worries were about tips and exams. Now she sat beside a man from redacted FBI files. Stop shaking, Damien ordered, his eyes glued to a tablet that cast a blue glow on his chiseled jaw. Fear has a scent, Evelyn. In my world, it draws predators. I'm not scared of you, Evelyn whispered, the lie so thin it was almost transparent. Damien turned toward her with a slow, deliberate grace, He reached over, tucking an errant strand of hair behind her ear. The heat of his fingers was a stark contrast to her icy skin. Good, because I'm the safest thing in your life right now. It's everyone else you need to start worrying about. The Escalade rolled into a private underground garage that felt like a vault, all concrete walls, steel doors, and uniformed guards at attention. "Welcome home, Bella," Damien murmured as her door was opened. The penthouse was a fortress in the sky, a sprawling space of glass and steel occupying the Millennium Tower's entire summit. The decor was glass, steel, and black marble, beautiful, sterile, and as devoid of warmth as its owner. "A man named Matthew will fetch your things from your apartment," Damien said, tossing his keys on a marble island worth more than her entire education. "My roommates," Evelyn started to protest. "They'll think you won a last-minute scholarship to study abroad. It's been arranged with the university. You're on an official academic leave." Evelyn spun around. "You tampered with my school's records." "I paid for a new library. Same result." Damien walked to the window wall overlooking the park. He loosened his tie, the first human gesture she'd seen from him. "We need rules, Evelyn," he said, turning back to her. "1, you don't leave this apartment unless I or Matthew is with you. 2, you don't answer your phone unless I've approved the number. 3, we share a bedroom." Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. "That wasn't in the deal. I said no physical contact." "I said I wouldn't touch you without permission," Damien corrected, his movement fluid and predatory as he closed the distance between them. "But the staff is always here, maids, security. If they see us in separate rooms, word gets out. If word gets out, Lucas Russo knows it's a sham. If Lucas knows, he'll have you killed." He stopped, standing just inches away. "So we share a bed. It's a king-sized mattress. Stay on your half and you won't be touched. Cross that line." His eyes went dark, his gaze dropping to her mouth. "And I can't promise I'll remain a gentleman." Evelyn swallowed hard, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Fine. But I'm wearing pajamas, the ugliest flannel ones I can find." A low, rough laugh rumbled from Damien's chest, a sound that seemed rusty from lack of use. "We have a gala tomorrow night, the St. Clair Foundation benefit. It's the biggest event of the year. Every major player will be there. Politicians, judges, the heads of the 5 families." "Tomorrow? I can't learn how to be a mob wife in 24 hours. You're smart. You're a law student. You analyze people for a living. Just watch them with the same focus you used when you told me to slow down." Evelyn's cheeks burned with color. "That was an accident." "Was it?" Damien countered. "Or did you enjoy having control?" Before she could answer, a stout, older woman bustled into the room carrying a garment bag. "Signora Ricci," Damien greeted her with a respectful nod. "Get her ready." Signora Ricci gave Evelyn a thorough, critical look. Too thin, too American, but the bones were good. She clapped her hands sharply. "Come, Piccolola, we have work to do. If you stand with the devil, you must look like a queen." The next 12 hours were an intense, rigorous reinvention. Evelyn was scrubbed, plucked, buffed, and measured by Signora Ricci, a tyrant armed with a measuring tape. When Evelyn finally saw herself in the full-length mirror the next evening, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The gown was a deep, blood-red silk that clung to her like a second skin. It was cut daringly low in back, with a slit that traveled high up her thigh. Her hair fell in classic glamorous waves, and a diamond necklace glittered at her throat, feeling as heavy as a leash. "Perfect," a voice said from the doorway. Evelyn turned to see Damien leaning against the frame in an immaculate tuxedo. He looked impossibly handsome, but the butt of a gun visible in his shoulder holster was a harsh reminder of what he was. He crossed the room to stand behind her, their reflections merging in the mirror. He was the darkness to her light. "One last thing," he whispered, pulling a ring from his pocket. It was a platinum band holding a diamond the size of a robin's egg. He slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It was my mother's," he said, his voice flat. "Don't lose it? She killed the last person who tried to take it from her." "How comforting," Evelyn muttered, staring at the brilliant stone. "Damien, what if I mess this up?" "You won't." He turned her to face him, his hands gripping her waist. "Just remember this. Tonight, you belong to me. You're not Evelyn the waitress. You are Evelyn Moretti, future wife of the Capo dei Capi. Let them see your fire." He offered his arm. "Shall we go to war, baby?" Taking a deep breath, Evelyn gathered her nerve and took his arm. "Don't call me baby." "Make me," he smirked, leading her to the elevator. The St. Clair Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Inside, the Temple of Dender glowed under soft golden lights, a backdrop for the city's most dangerous predators dressed in designer armor. When Damien and Evelyn stepped out of the limo, they were met with a blinding assault of camera flashes. The paparazzi screamed Damien's name, desperate for a shot of the elusive billionaire and his mystery woman. "Chin up," Damien murmured, his hand firm on the small of her back. "Look bored. It drives them crazy." Evelyn lifted her chin, putting on the cool, indifferent face of a supermodel. She felt Damien's thumb stroking her hip through the silk, a grounding touch that sent a jolt of electricity up her spine. The air inside was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. A string quartet played, but their music was mostly lost beneath the hum of 100 conversations. As they moved through the room, a path opened before them as if by magic. Men gave them respectful nods. Women whispered behind their champagne glasses, their eyes a mixture of envy and scorn. "Moretti!" a booming voice called out. Damien's body went rigid for a second before he relaxed into a mask of casual ease. "Senator, good to see you." Senator Reeves, a man Evelyn knew from news reports about his tough-on-crime platform, shook Damien's hand warmly. "And what of the stunning woman?" Damien introduced, drawing her almost imperceptibly closer. "This is Evelyn, my fiancée." A flicker of disbelief crossed the senator's face. "Fiancé? I had no idea you were inclined toward matrimony, Damien. I thought your only bride was the business." Meeting Evelyn changed my calculus. Damien parried without a beat. Evelyn extended her hand with a smile. "It is a pleasure, Senator. I have been following your zoning reform bill quite closely. Clause 14 is certainly bold, though the eminent domain provisions do raise some constitutional questions for me." The senator was visibly taken aback. Damien gazed down at her, his expression a mixture of genuine surprise and pride. "The woman is informed," the senator managed to say. "She's a prodigy," Damien corrected, his tone definitive, "and a law student." As they proceeded, Damien leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Clause 14. "Show off. I have a perfect 4.0 GPA, Damien. I am more than just ornamentation. I am starting to appreciate that." "Well now, what a quaint domestic scene." The voice was a venomous whisper that coiled in the air. Evelyn felt Damien's body tense into solid stone beside her. They pivoted to find Lucas Russo, a martini glass in hand. At his side was his son, Antonio, a coarser version of his father, whose eyes performed a crude, invasive survey of Evelyn's form. "Lucas," Damien greeted, his nod a clear and present warning. "So the gossip holds true," Lucas smirked, his eyes locked on Evelyn. "The hired help. You've cleaned her up remarkably well, Damien. How much did the dress set you back? More than she's worth, I imagine." Damien surged forward, but a firm squeeze from Evelyn on his arm halted him. She remembered the contract. She was his shield. Stepping forward to stand just in front of Damien, she met Lucas's stare, summoning the fury from every indignity she had ever suffered. "My name is Evelyn," she said, her voice a blade of ice. "And as for my worth, Mr. Russo, I am the one who made Damien Moretti say please. What have you ever made him do other than check the time?" A stark, absolute silence descended upon their small circle. Antonio Russo made a slight gagging sound. Damien was a statue, except for a twitch at the edge of his mouth. A tide of crimson rose in Lucas's face, the telltale sign of wounded pride. "You have a sharp mouth, girl. Try not to slit your own throat with it. Is that a threat, Lucas?" Damien's voice was stripped of all its earlier charm. The social mask had fallen away. "Because threatening my future wife in public means we can skip the formalities. I will end this now, right in front of the good senator." The muscles in Lucas's jaw bunched. "Enjoy what's left of your evening, Damien." He spun away, Antonio in his wake, but not before throwing one last look at Evelyn. A clear promise of retribution. "You have an astonishing desire to die," Damien murmured, steering her to the bar with the grip that was both tight and proprietary. "I was running a defense," Evelyn retorted. "I don't need you to defend me. I need you to stay alive." Damien ordered a whiskey. Neat. Still, that was quite a performance. "I can't stand him," Evelyn confessed, steadying her nerves with a sip of champagne. "There's something reptilian about him. He is, and he's desperate, which makes him exponentially more dangerous." Damien's eyes swept the room methodically, a constant patrol of exits, hands, and reflections. "Dance with me?" he said, his voice abrupt. "What?" "Russo is watching from the balcony. We need to sell this. The illusion of intimacy is paramount." He took her glass, placed it on a passing tray, and led her onto the floor as the orchestra began a waltz. Damien pulled her into his frame, his large, warm hand a firm pressure on her back, moving her with an expert's grace. For a moment, the world dissolved for Evelyn. The guns, the danger, the entire contract vanished. There was only the solid reality of his body and the rhythm of their shared movement, a seamless synchronicity that felt ancient. "You're remarkably skilled for a man in your line of work," she noted, looking up at him. "My mother insisted on lessons. She said a man who can't lead on a dance floor can't lead anywhere else." Damien's gaze fell to her lips, the focus intense. "Evelyn, about the other night, that word you used." "Baby," she challenged softly, riding the wave of adrenaline. "Don't!" he warned, his voice audibly tight. "What were you thinking?" "I told you, I was talking to my niece." "I know, but you weren't looking at her. You were looking at me." Evelyn felt a slow burn of heat rise along her neck from the sheer intensity of the moment. "Perhaps," Damien breathed, closing the minimal distance between them. "Or perhaps you saw something in me that wasn't a monster." "I haven't decided yet," she whispered back. Without warning, Damien froze. His entire body went rigid. Damien, His eyes were no longer on her. They were fixed over her shoulder, tracking a waiter weaving through the guests. The man held a tray of champagne, but his gaze was locked on Damien, and his free hand was slipping under the tray's velvet cloth. "Get down!" The order was a visceral roar. He threw Evelyn aside, sending her sprawling onto the hard marble. Fut, fut, fut. 3 silenced shots tore through the air where her head had just been. A nearby ice sculpture exploded into shards. Screams erupted. The orchestra fell silent. Evelyn scrambled away, the sound of her dress ripping lost in the noise. She looked up and saw Damien moving forward. He was not retreating. He was attacking. The fake waiter was raising his weapon for another shot, but Damien was already on him. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting with sickening force until the bone snapped. The gun clattered to the floor. Damien drove a knee into his gut before slamming him against a marble column by his throat. "Who sent you?" Damien's roar was a physical force in the room. The assassin choked, spitting blood, his hand fumbling for a knife. Damien didn't hesitate. He pulled his own sidearm, a sleek silver pistol, and pistol-whipped the man across the temple with brutal efficiency. The man crumpled to the floor. The chaos peaked as guests stormed the exits and security swarmed in. Damien turned, his chest heaving, a primal look in his eyes. He scanned the chaos until they found Evelyn. She was on the floor, amidst the broken glass, shaking, a streak of blood on her arm. The fury in Damien's face vanished, instantly replaced by a stark, unfiltered terror. Holstering his gun, he rushed to her side, dropping to his knees. "Evelyn, look at me. Are you hit?" His hands moved over her in a frantic, desperate search for injury. I'm fine," she stammered, her ears ringing. "The arm... It was the glass." Damien's eyes focused on the cut, and his expression hardened into something impossibly dark. He pulled the square from his pocket and pressed it against the wound. "Matthew!" he yelled, his gaze never leaving her. Matthew appeared through the haze, gun raised. "Boss, exits are locked down. It was one shooter. Russo and his people are gone. Get the car ready," Damien snarled. "We're leaving, now. Burn this entire place down if you have to, but get us clear." Damien swept Evelyn into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She buried her face against his neck, inhaling the sharp mix of gunpowder and sandalwood. "You saved me," she breathed, the shock finally setting in. "I told you," Damien growled, forging a path through the stampede toward a service door. "I protect what's mine." And Russo just made his last mistake. As they broke into the cool night air, filled with approaching sirens, Evelyn knew the truth. The charade was over. There was no fake engagement anymore. This was war. And as she clung to Damien Moretti, the most terrifying thing wasn't the gunfire. It was the fact that in his arms, surrounded by violence, she felt safer than she had in her entire life. The safe house was the severe, brutalist mansion perched on the cliffs of Montauk, not a bunker. Below, the ocean crashed against the rocks, a sound that echoed the storm inside Damien's mind. 3 hours had passed since the gala. Damien hadn't said a word since he brought her inside, depositing her in the master bathroom, a stark chamber of black slate and white linen. "Sit," he ordered, his voice raw. Evelyn obeyed, settling on the lip of the oversized tub. An uncontrollable tremor began as the shock fully registered. Her red gown was a ruin of torn fabric, smeared with grime, and a trace of blood from the glass on her arm. Damien began washing his hands with a methodical intensity, the water running red as he scrubbed the assassin's blood from his skin. He refused to look at her. He couldn't. If he looked, he would only see the terror he had put in her eyes. Turning off the tap, he dried his hands, then produced a medical kit. He knelt before her, the same position he'd taken at the gala, only this time the adrenaline was gone, replaced by a heavy, soul-crushing guilt. "Show me your arm," he whispered. Evelyn offered her forearm. The cut was shallow, but the sight of it was deeply unsettling. As Damien dabbed it with antiseptic, she hissed and pulled back from the sting. "Forgive me," he murmured, his hands stilling. His fingers, usually so lethal, now trembled. "Forgive me, Evelyn." "This wasn't you," she replied softly. "All the blame for this is mine." Damien kept his gaze down, focused on applying a butterfly stitch. "I put you in harm's way. A decoy to draw their fire. It was pure arrogance. I thought I could control everything. Tonight was proof I can't." He finished his work and finally met her eyes. They were gray and haunted. "Our agreement is cancelled." Evelyn simply blinked. "What?" "Matthew has a car downstairs. He will drive you to a private airfield for a flight to Switzerland. I have a chalet there. You will be safe there until I have finished with the Russos. Afterward, a new identity will be provided, a new name, a new beginning. You will have no more contact with me." He rose and turned his back on her, unable to watch her react. "Your niece's medical care will be funded for life, but your business with Damien Moretti is concluded." Evelyn studied the rigid line of his shoulders, the posture of a man who believes he is poison to everyone he touches. She remembered him shielding her with his body. She remembered how quickly he had dispatched the killer. Most women would have run. Most would have taken the ticket to Switzerland without a second glance. But Evelyn Vance's entire existence had been a fight against poverty, for her family, for her own future. She did not run. She stood, moved toward him, and laid a hand on his back. He flinched like he'd been burned. "No," she said. Damien spun around, his face a mask of disbelief. "Do you not understand me? They shot at you. Their next shot might not miss." "If I go, they get what they want," Evelyn said, her voice finding its strength. "If I disappear, Lucas knows he hurt you. He will smell weakness. He will come for you. And he will come for me anyway, because I am a loose end." "I can protect you better from a distance," Damien roared, the fury a poor mask for his terror. "And who protects you?" Evelyn yelled back. The silence that followed was absolute. Damien just stared at her, shocked. "You have gunmen, Damien. You have an army, but you have no one who cares if you live or die. You are utterly alone." Evelyn stepped closer, invading his space. "I am not going anywhere. We have a deal. 6 months." "I don't break my deals." Damien looked down at her, at the fire in her eyes. He felt a deep crack in a wall he'd built 2 decades ago, the day his father was killed in front of him. "You are a profoundly foolish woman," he whispered. His words, however, held no real venom. "And you have terrible oversight," she retorted. "You haven't once asked if I've eaten." A choked sound, half laugh and half groan, escaped him. He reached out, framing her face with his hands, his thumbs stroking the arches of her cheeks. "Evelyn," he said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding purr, "stay, and I will burn the world down before I let them touch you again." "Okay," she breathed. He leaned in. The air between them felt electric. His lips hovered inches from hers, a silent question, waiting for her to pull away. When she didn't, and her eyelids fluttered closed, he covered the distance. The kiss was not tender. It was elemental. It tasted of whiskey and the ragged edge of survival. Damien kissed her like a drowning man, and she was his only breath of air. His hands fisted in her hair, pulling her body flush against his. Evelyn wrapped her arms around his neck, using her own weight to anchor him. For a moment, the world outside, the syndicate, the war, the blood, melted away, replaced by the heat of two souls who had faced death and chosen to stand together. Damien pulled back first, breathing hard, his forehead resting on hers. "Go to sleep," he commanded, his voice strained. "Another minute close to you, and I'll break my 6-month rule." Evelyn's heart hammered. She wanted him to break it, but she just gave a nod. "Good night, Damien." He walked to the doorway and paused with his hand on the frame. "Lock this. Open it for no one but me." 3 weeks crawled by. The war with the Russos settled into a tense standoff, a psychological grind that was worse than open conflict. The organization was bleeding resources. Shipments were hit. Federal raids on Damien's properties happened with impossible accuracy. They were back in the city, but the penthouse had become a beautiful prison. Damien had all but stopped sleeping. His nights were spent in the study with his inner circle, Matthew, his top enforcer, and Victoria, the syndicate's lawyer. Evelyn had been pushed to the background, playing the part of the lovely, traumatized bride-to-be, but Evelyn was never one to stay in the background. While Damien held his war councils, she did her own research in the library. Not on novels, but on the corporate files Damien kept on the secure network. She had found a discrepancy. It was a Tuesday night. A violent storm hammered New York, rain smacking the panoramic windows. The tension inside the penthouse was suffocating. "We lost another shipment in Jersey," Matthew said, his voice low. He paced the length of the room, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. The feds knew it was coming. They had the exact container number, Damien, the exact one. Damien sat on the leather couch, his stare fixed on the cold fireplace. He looked exhausted. Only 3 people knew that container number: me, you, and Victorio. Victorio, a polished man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that cost as much as a car, shook his head. "And the Port Authority director. The Russo family has very deep pockets, Damien. They could have easily paid him off. That director has been on my payroll for 10 years, Damien shot back. He knows I would skin him alive for less." "Then the leak is inside our walls," Matthew said, his hand dropping to his holstered gun. "We need to clean house, starting from the bottom." "The leak isn't at the bottom." The voice floated down from the spiral staircase. All 3 men turned. Evelyn was standing there. She wore one of Damien's oversized shirts and her glasses, holding a thick stack of printed reports. "Evelyn, go back upstairs," Damien ordered, his tone like a blade. "This has nothing to do with you." "You're losing because you're looking for a soldier," Evelyn said, descending the steps. She ignored the warning glint in Damien's eyes. She walked right up to this coffee table and dropped the documents onto it with a thud. "You should be looking for an accountant." Victoria let out a condescending chuckle. "My dear, why don't you stick to spending Damien's money? Leave the real business to the men." Evelyn leveled a stare at Victoria, a look she usually reserved for difficult professors. "I am a paralegal, Victoria. My focus is corporate fraud and forensic accounting, and frankly, your shell companies are sloppy." The room plunged into total silence. Damien sat up straighter in his chair. "Explain." Evelyn laid out the papers. I was bored, so I started digging into the acquisition files for the warehouse properties, specifically the shell company for the Jersey Depot. It's a Cayman entity called Moretti Holdings. Looks normal, she said, pointing to a highlighted section, but the company's yearly registration fees are not paid from the main account. They're funded from a separate LLC called Janus Global. So, Matthew asked, completely lost. So, Evelyn pressed on, her confidence growing. I looked into Janus Global. It's a ghost company, but the IP address from its online tax payments is linked to a home in Scarsdale. She slowly turned her head to look at Victorio. Victorio, don't you have a weekend house in Scarsdale? Victorio's face went white. He jumped to his feet. This is outrageous. She's hacking our private files, Damien. She is a threat to our security. She's right, Damien said quietly. His eyes were locked on Victorio, not the papers. The IP address, is it registered to you? Damien, I worked for your father. I've worked for you my whole life, Victorio stammered, stumbling backward. The container number, Evelyn cut in, her voice merciless. It was listed on the legal manifest for the insurance claim. Victorio is the one who handles the insurance. Damien stood. The alpha predator was back in the room. He walked slowly toward the man who had been like an uncle to him. Why? Damien asked, his voice soft. Victorio backed into the wall. He was shaking. Russo, he gave me a way out. Immunity. The federal case is getting stronger, Damien. The RICO charges are going to stick. I refused to die in a cage. So you betrayed me? Damien's voice was completely flat. You betrayed my men. You betrayed her. She is nothing, Victorio spat, gesturing wildly at Evelyn. A waitress, a toy. You're getting soft, Damien. She has made you weak. Victorio's hand slid into his jacket. Don't, Damien said. But Victorio was already pulling out the handgun. Before he could raise it, a single, deafening gunshot blasted through the penthouse. Victorio crumpled to his knees, a shocked look on his face, before toppling forward onto the Persian rug. Evelyn screamed, clapping her hands over her ears. Damien stood unmoving, his arm extended, a wisp of smoke rising from the barrel of his silver pistol. He hadn't hesitated for a second. He didn't flinch. Matthew's voice cut in, confirming the target's neutralization. He's gone, boss. Still, Damien kept his weapon raised, his eyes fixed on the traitor's corpse. He finally turned toward Evelyn. She was trembling, her gaze locked the dead man. Holstering his gun, Damien moved toward her, expecting her to shrink away. He had just executed someone in their home. Evelyn, he said, his tone careful. She looked up, her face ashen but her jaw set firm. Her eyes darted from the body to him. He was going to kill you, she said, her voice a monotone. Yes. So you had no choice. A shuddering breath escaped Damien. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in the scent of vanilla and rain that clung to her hair. She was the only clean thing left in his corrupted world. You found the mole, he murmured against her hair. You saved us again. I told you, she whispered into his chest, her fingers twisting his shirt fabric. I'm more than just ornamentation. He drew back, his expression a mix of awe and a raw, primal hunger. The thrill of the kill and the stark relief of survival brewed a dangerous elixir within him. Matthew, Damien commanded, his eyes still on Evelyn. Sanitize the area. Ready the men. We have Russo's entire playbook now. Tonight we end this war. Yes, boss, Matthew replied, already dragging the body away. Damien took Evelyn's hand. Come with me. He led her past the safe room, straight to their bedroom. He kicked the door shut, the lock clicking into place. A storm raged outside, but the tempest inside them was far more violent. You just watched me kill a man, Damien stated, pinning her against the door. And you didn't run. I'm done running, Evelyn breathed. She reached up, her hands undoing his collar. They shook, but not with fear. A low, animalistic groan escaped Damien's throat. He devoured her mouth in a kiss that bordered on violence. Lifting her, he wrapped her legs around his waist and carried her to the bed. Say it, he growled against her neck as they crashed onto the mattress. Say what? She gasped for air. He pulled away, his eyes burning into hers. Call me what you called me that first night. Use the name that makes you mine. Evelyn tangled her fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer. Baby, she whispered. Damien Moretti, New York's reputed devil, was conquered. The war didn't end with an explosion, but with a breath of sound. Evelyn's discovery of the Janus Global Files gave Damien more than just a traitor's name. It was a complete roadmap to Lucas Russo's entire enterprise. Bribe ledgers, hidden accounts, and the exact location of his Catskills safe house. Damien didn't send an army, he went himself, with Matthew and a small crew of 4. He also brought Evelyn, not into the firefight, but close enough to witness. She watched from an armored SUV parked at the bottom of the private drive, tracking the mission on a tactical tablet. She saw the thermal signatures of Damien's team breaching the compound. She witnessed the swift, brutal precision of the Moretti organization in action. Within 20 minutes, it was over. The radio crackled to life. Secure! Bring her up! The vehicle crawled up the snow-covered road to the rustic lodge. As Evelyn stepped out, the air bit at her cheeks, smelling of pine and gunpowder. Matthew met her at the door. He's in the study, he said, holstering his sidearm. Damien wants you to see this. He wants you to know it's truly done. Evelyn walked into the study. A roaring fire filled the room with a warmth that felt like a mockery of the violence just outside. Lucas Russo was kneeling in the center of the room, battered but conscious. Damien stood over him, swirling a glass of Russo's own scotch. His attention snapped to Evelyn as she entered. His face was the hard mask of the dawn, but his eyes softened only for her. Evelyn, Damien said, his voice even. Come here. She moved to his side. He didn't touch her, but his nearness was a tangible shield. Damien turned his gaze back to his enemy. You remember Evelyn? The waitress you decided wasn't worth the price of her dress. Lucas spat a glob of blood onto the antique rug. Go to hell, Moretti. You think this changes anything? The commission will... The commission knows you stole from the pension funds, Damien cut in. Evelyn found the transfers. You've been bleeding your own men dry, Lucas. No one is coming for you. You're alone. Lucas's eyes darted to Evelyn, and a raw, cold fear finally bloomed in them. The girl found it. The queen found it, Damien corrected, crouching to meet the broken man's eyes. I'm giving you a choice, Lucas, a generous one. You can sign over your territories in Brooklyn and Queens to me and disappear. Or, Damien tapped the glass rim, we can finish what we started at the gala. Lucas glanced at the pistol on the desk, then at Damien. Finally, his eyes fell on the contract Matthew laid before him. With a trembling hand, Lucas signed. Damien straightened. A wise decision. Matthew, get him out of my sight. If he's still in New York by sunrise, kill him. As Lucas was hauled away, the tension in the room vanished. Only Damien and Evelyn were left. The war was over, the Russo family was broken, the Moretti Empire was absolute. But one final contract was yet to be settled. 2 days later, the 6-month term was up. The penthouse was quiet. A fresh rain fell on New York, washing the city's grime away. Evelyn was packing. Not the designer gowns or jewels Damien gave her, but her old life. Jeans, sweaters, worn-out sneakers. She heard the front door open. Damien walked in, holding a manila envelope. He stopped cold when he saw the suitcase on the bed, a muscle working in his clenched jaw. "You're packing," he stated. "It's been 6 months, Damien," Evelyn replied, not looking at him as she folded a shirt with shaky hands. "The deal is done. You won. You're safe." Damien walked over, placing the envelope on the bed. "This is your payment. $5 million. Tax-free. Wired to a Zurich account, along with the deed to an apartment in Paris. It's fully furnished." Evelyn stared at the envelope. It was everything she once thought she wanted. Freedom, safety for her niece, a new life. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You held up your end of the bargain," Damien said. His voice was toneless, void of emotion. "The walls are back up. You were the perfect shield." "Is that all I was?" Evelyn asked, finally meeting his eyes. Damien turned from her, walking to the window. "It's the job you agreed to." "That's not what I asked." Damien's knuckles went white as he gripped the windowsill. "Evelyn, just go. Take the money and leave. You don't belong in this life. You saw what I did to Victoria. You saw what I did to Lucas." "I am a monster. The blood on my hands will never wash off." "I know," Evelyn said. She crossed the room until she stood right behind him. "But you didn't force me to stay at the safe house. You didn't force me to find the accounts. I chose to." "You chose to survive." Damien spun around, his gaze searing. "But you don't have to just survive anymore. You can live. Go find some nice lawyer or a doctor, someone who comes home at 5 p.m. and doesn't check his car for bombs." "I don't want a nice lawyer," Evelyn shot back, tears welling in her eyes. "I want you." "Why?" Damien cried out, the agony raw in his voice. "Why would you want a life of looking over your shoulder?" "Because when I'm looking over my shoulder, you're there," Evelyn's voice broke. "Because you saved my niece and asked for nothing. Because you see me as your equal, not as your property. Because I love you, you idiot." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rain against the glass. Damien stared, breathing hard. The most feared man in New York looked utterly destroyed by a woman in a simple sweatshirt. "You love me?" he whispered, the words foreign on his tongue. "Yes." Evelyn stepped forward, pressing her palms against his chest. His heart hammered against her hands. "I love the monster. I love the man. I love the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring, his mother's, that she'd taken off to pack. Evelyn pressed the symbolic ring into his palm, a direct challenge. "If you want me to leave, Damien, then tell me to go. Tell me you feel nothing, look me in the eyes, and tell me I was just a job." Damien stared at the object, then at her. His carefully constructed defenses crumbled. A total system failure. He tossed the ring aside and grabbed her in a crushing, possessive embrace. He lifted her off her feet, a display of dominance that ended with him burying his face in her neck, a sign of utter dependence. "I can't," he admitted, his voice a guttural rasp. "God help me, I can't let you go. You're the only thing that's real. You're my only light." He set her down but kept his hands framing her face, his gaze intense. "If you stay," he warned, his voice turning lethal. The path back was gone, the dream of Paris, an illusion. "You belong to me until my final breath. and I will set the world on fire for you daily. It was a flawless exhibition of possessive narcissism. Evelyn displayed classic capture bonding, her smile soothing her captor. I don't need Paris, she breathed. I belong right here. Damien presented the ring. His hands, steady with the weapon, now trembled as he slid it onto her finger. Then stay, he commanded softly. Marry me. Become this city's queen. She eyed the symbol of her captivity, then the man whose aggression was her shield. Yes, she consented. Damien's narcissistic core returned, now fused to his pathological obsession. He pulled her close, his lips hovering over hers. A wise choice, he whispered. Now come here. Evelyn's laugh was a soft chime as her arms circled his neck. Say it again, she dared. His kiss was a permanent vow sealed on her mouth. I love you, he murmured against her lips. Is that slow enough? The wedding of Damien Moretti and Evelyn Vance was the event of the decade. They didn't hide or elope. Their vows were made in St. Patrick's Cathedral, before the eyes of the city. It was a proclamation. The lion had his lioness, rendering the Moretti dynasty untouchable. Evelyn graduated law school with highest distinction. She bypassed corporate law entirely. She became chief counsel for Moretti Legitimate Enterprises, forging the business into an unbreakable legal fortress. She was velvet glove concealing Damien's iron will. Years later, in a club of obsidian and shadow, music throbbed. From Table 4, New York's power couple surveyed their kingdom. A trembling young waiter approached with a tray of drinks. His hand shook as he placed a glass near Damien. It tipped, spilling onto Damien's cuff. The boy froze, trapped in the sudden silence. Damien studied the blemish, his gaze lifting to the waiter. His eyes were ice, but before he spoke, Evelyn laid a hand on his arm. She leaned in, a whisper meant only for him. Damien's features softened. A slow smirk played on his lips as he looked at his wife, then back to the waiter. Mistakes happen, Damien said, his voice even. Clean this, and bring my wife another glass of champagne. The waiter fled, his relief a palpable thing. You're getting soft, old man, Evelyn teased over her glass. Damien leaned back, pulling her closer with an arm over her chair. I am not soft. I just yield to my superior. Evelyn's laugh filled the club, the sound of a woman who met the fire and made it her own. She was no longer the server whispering of a mistake. She was the woman who calmed the devil with a single breath. And that is the story of how an error made a waitress a mafia queen. It proves that great failures can yield the greatest triumphs, and that even the strongest men have an Achilles heel. I hope you found this examination of Damien and Evelyn's world compelling. If their dark romance and the constant threat of danger held your interest, please press the like button. It is crucial for the channel's growth. Subscribe and enable notifications so you won't miss our next analysis.
Life lesson. Violence does not only destroy bodies, it also colonizes identity, love, and the imagination of the future. He believed he was building security. In truth, he was cultivating a kingdom so dependent on fear that tenderness itself became a strategic risk. She believed she was entering danger by necessity. In truth, she was stepping into a closed moral ecosystem where every favor created a chain, every kindness carried leverage, and every act of protection concealed the architecture of control. From a distance, their story looks like a dark romance wrapped in luxury and adrenaline. Yet beneath the diamonds, the tailored suits, and the operatic confrontations, the deeper structure is tragic. It is the story of two people shaped by systems larger than themselves, one by violence inherited and normalized, the other by economic desperation so severe that danger becomes negotiable. That is why the story resonates. It is not merely about a mafia boss and a law student, it is about how power recruits vulnerability and how wounded people mistake intensity for safety because ordinary peace has never felt available to them. The man at the center of this story does not simply command violence, he embodies its logic. He trusts what he can dominate, he values what he can protect, he loves through enclosure. This is not accidental, it is the psychology of men raised in empires where masculinity is measured by possession, emotional restraint, retaliation, and control over uncertainty. He sees attachment not as comfort, but as liability. He does not imagine intimacy as mutual surrender, he imagines it as a perimeter to be defended. In that sense, he is not just an individual, he is the final product of a culture that teaches men to bury grief until it calcifies into leadership. And she significantly is not attracted to violence in the abstract. She is drawn toward the strange consistency inside it. In a world where bills cannot be paid and institutions move slowly, his decisiveness appears almost divine. He acts, he solves, he protects. He does what ordinary systems fail to do for her family. That is what makes the emotional core of the story so unsettling. It suggests that people do not always fall for cruelty because they are naive. Sometimes they fall for it because cruelty, when disciplined and directed, can masquerade as competence. The hand that controls can look remarkably similar to the hand that saves. This is where the cycle of violence becomes most visible. He was likely made by fear, so he governs through fear. She is endangered by that world, yet also preserved by it. The system harms her and shelters her in the same motion. That paradox is crucial. Cycles of violence survive not only because they terrify people, but because they occasionally reward them. They offer protection from the very chaos they generate. They create the wound, then sell the bandage. Entire families, institutions, and nations operate this way. The symbolic force of the story lies in its repeated blurring of categories. The club is also a fortress. The engagement is also a trap. The penthouse is also a prison. The rescuer is also the reason rescue is necessary. That doubleness reflects a mature life lesson. The most dangerous things in adulthood rarely appear as obvious villains. They appear as solutions. The job that destroys the soul looks like success. The relationship that limits freedom looks like devotion. The protective instinct becomes domination. The noble sacrifice becomes self-erasure. Evil, in many cases, survives by wearing the costume of necessity. The rivalries in the story also reveal a profound emptiness inside performative masculinity. Men wage wars to prove they are not weak, yet every escalation exposes how governed they are by fear of humiliation. Their language is not emotional truth, it is status choreography. They threaten because they cannot grieve. They posture because vulnerability would dismantle the myth that keeps the machine running. In that sense, the criminal underworld is not separate from ordinary society. It is merely a more honest theater of the same sickness. The boardroom and the mob table often share a grammar: dominance, secrecy, succession anxiety, and the inability to name tenderness without reducing it to possession. What then is the lesson? Not that love redeems violence, that would be too easy and too dishonest. The lesson is that love, when it appears inside a violent system, reveals the system's deformities with merciless clarity. Once he cares, he cannot hide from what his world does to the innocent. Once she matters, his methods stop looking like abstract necessities and start looking like personal failures. Love does not instantly heal him. It indicts him. It forces him to see that his power has always been purchased with futures other people never got to live. For her, the lesson is equally painful. She learns that intelligence and courage can win a seat at the table, but they cannot neutralize the moral gravity of the table itself. She can decode ledgers, expose betrayal, and outthink men who underestimated her. Yet empowerment within a corrupt structure remains morally complex. Becoming indispensable to power is not the same as becoming free from it. And perhaps that is the most haunting truth of all. The story's deepest question is not whether they love each other. It is whether two people forged in an emergency can ever imagine a life not organized around emergency. Can those who learned intimacy through crisis ever recognize peace when it arrives? Or would peace feel to them like emptiness? He thought he was raising walls against the world. He was really sealing himself inside a mausoleum built from fear. She thought she was accepting a bargain to survive. She was actually entering a mirror hall where protection, desire, dependency, and control kept borrowing each other's faces. The tragedy is not simply that violence hurts. The tragedy is that violence teaches people to misname what hurts them and to call it home.